keys to changing the culture of birth.
3 keys to changing
Totally,
birth.
please, because you know I'm all about changing the culture of birth. Change the culture of birth and change in this stepping into the shift of what birth can be.
Well, I think what you went back to authenticity. I go back to my own experience when I was first a mom. I lived in southern New Mexico. I lived on a farm. We had goats. We had chickens. There were no midwives. I called up the state office. I said, you know, where's a midwife? No midwives. Didn't certify midwives. My husband knew a midwife that used to be a midwife in England. We had some friends that were a couple hundred miles away. I went to an OBGYN. He gives me a diet the first time I go there. I throw it in the fireplace and start, call my husband. I'm crying. How do I find a place? How do we find a place as women to get that strength to do it our own way? For me, it was the animals. Seeing that I would wake up in the morning, there'd be a new goat. I'd be like, okay, maybe it's not so bad. Maybe I can do it. So I also was a swimmer, a competitive swimmer in high school, so I thought, okay, when I was swimming, I could swim and I wouldn't even be able to feel my legs at the end, but I could still go on. So I knew my body had a capacity to go beyond my mind, what my mind thought it could be. So I think it's what you're saying is how do you get down to your really core animal self and trust that animal self and observe the things that happen around you that happen when you trust that self, how things kind of fall into place, how there's a kind of a frequency that happens when you're really true to yourself, what things are, you attract other things into your life. So I think it's getting into that core self. It's realizing that birth is hugely political. It's financially political. There's money involved.
Eyes
There's
wide open.
politics. Eyes wide open. Seeing the politics of birth. And then the final piece, I think, of ultimately being totally compassionate with yourself. That you put yourself out there, that you go right to the limit, you try exactly what you want, and then you surrender to the mystery. Because shit happens, life happens, and you can't control life. You can't control birth, and you can't control children. And so there's that element of out of control, that's good out of control, that is something you can trust because looking back, it'll all make sense to you. Oh, I see why that makes sense now. That got me over here, and now I'm over here. So there's both the unfolding of life and trusting that, as well as being a fierce advocate for yourself as a woman, for being respected as a woman, and for other women being respected in birth. Because birth is a rite of passage. Every single woman will remember her birth for her entire life, and that will be a marker on how she views herself and how things go forward in her life. So she deserves to have, in that moment of transition, at that moment of rite of passage, the most supportive environment she can have.